This week on Lone Wolf's Whitetail Addictions, be in the tree with Adam Hayes on Halloween night when he spots a giant 8-point in central Ohio. Then, 3 weeks later in the Edmonton bow zone, Adam comes face to face with the buck of his dreams.
I got my start in hunting just like a lot of guys do. You know, when I was growing up, my dad deer hunted, and I'd see him head out on the weekends in the fall, you know, all camoed up with his bow and arrows, and I just couldn't wait till I was old enough to be able to hunt myself. And about the time I got into high school, I started doing a little bit of small game hunting with some of my friends and my dad just right outside the Columbus city limits. And we were seeing more deer and bigger bucks on those trips than I ever did down south. So I actually started hunting close to home, just right outside the Columbus city limits, and the first year I did that, I shot my first buck with a bow, not even 5 minutes from my house. Every day after school and on the weekends in the fall, I was out deer hunting somewhere. The only thing I wanted to do was move out west and work for an outfitter and guide for, you know, big game, elk and mule deer and that sort of thing. And when I graduated from high school, I moved out to Colorado and did that first season. I came home from Colorado more determined than ever to take a big buck with my bow. So I started glassing soybean fields that summer around my house, and I found a nice bachelor group of bucks not too far from where I lived, and I just camped out on them, and I was out there every chance I could watching them and keeping a journal on, you know, what trails they were using and what the wind was doing at that time. I went out and actually bought my first portable stand back then, one of the original Lone Wolf stands, and a week before season I went in and set that stand up, and I actually had to wait 2 or 3 days before I got a good wind to go in and hunt that stand. But first night in there, opening week, I shot a great buck with my bow, and you know, when I saw that work, you know, and all that scouting paid off and waiting for the right wind direction, you know, I knew I was onto something back then. I did the same thing every year after that. I'd go out in July and find a big buck in velvet in the bean fields. I'd watch him all July and August and keep an eye on, you know, what he was doing, how he was using the wind, and I'd set up on him in October when I got that wind I was waiting for, and it worked great. And there was quite a few years where I never even actually got to hunt the rut. I was usually tagged out in October. I started traveling a lot out of state and going to Illinois, Michigan, West Virginia, you know, just so I was able to keep hunting the rest of the year. But then that wasn't even enough. I wanted to shoot a monster, and the next step was killing a Boone Crockett. And actually, I'd seen a buck in Ohio where I'd been hunting for the past couple of years, and I figured that season he was probably going to be there. He's probably going to be over, you know, 170 or 180. And I spotted that deer in the summer and got some video of him in velvet, and I thought he was pushing 200 inches. There was a particular stand I wanted to hunt, but I had to wait until the third week before I got a northwest wind. But the first night in there, I rattled that buck in and shot him at 10 yards. And you know, if I live to be 100, I will never forget that deer. He grossed over 200 inches, and you know, that was one of the proudest moments of my life. And I figured after shooting a 200-inch whitetail with my bow, it was all downhill after that. But the following year in July, I spotted another big buck. Hunted that deer actually for 3 years before I ever got a shot at him, and by the time I did get an arrow in him, that buck grossed over 200 inches also. I've been very fortunate, you know, growing up in Ohio and having deer like that to hunt. But you know, even though they're here, it still takes a lot of time and effort, and you know, I put just as much, if not more, into it than anybody that I know, and I'm as persistent as it comes when it comes to hunting big deer. But I think my addiction now is worse than it's ever been, and my goal now is to try to take my third buck with a bow over 200 inches and tie Stan Potts. I believe he's the only guy in the world that's got 3 bow kills over 200. And you'll see on this week's show that this past year in the bow zone in Edmonton, I actually had that opportunity.
On the evening of October 30th, Adam was watching a soybean field in central Ohio when he spotted this giant 8-point. as the buck begins feeding in Adam's direction. He knows if the deer continues on its path, he'll pass by well out of bow range. So he calls at the giant buck in an attempt to bring him in closer. The huge 8-point cuts the distance in half, but is still deep in the field, and with no rangefinder, Adam decides to let the buck walk. The following morning, Adam is back in the same stand well before sunup. And as the sun and the winds rise, Adam spots the big 8-pointer at the far end of the bean field. The wide-racked bruiser stomps the earth repeatedly, trying to relocate a young doe he lost sight of in the mix of high weeds and soybeans. Unable to find the doe, the buck heads for cover and passes by Adam's stand again, but offering no chance for a shot.
That thing is a monster. 160-inch 8.
That same evening, Adam slipped back into his lone wolf stand, hoping to get one more look at the giant 8-point.
It's Halloween night, and I'm ready for a treat. It's our third set for that big 8-point. Saw him last night, this morning. He's right back in the same bedding area. We just need him to show up. Come within bow range of this stand, because he's got to be going that way. Wind's perfect. Just need some luck.
Luck was definitely on his side this Halloween night, when the monster 8-point emerged from the bedding area, and just like the night before, began feeding in Adam's direction. As the mature buck closes the distance, Adam ranges the buck just shy of 60 yards and prepares to make the shot.
Hey! Got him! I got him! I got him! 60 yards, baby!
He's down. He's down.
60 yards. I nailed him. We were supposed to leave Saturday night. It's Halloween. Came out to pull these stands. I was like, this stand is just, it's got to be hunted. Hadn't set this stand all year. Left the stand and we came out here last night. Saw that buck at 50 yards. Didn't have my rangefinder. I was not going to take a shot that far without ranging him. Sean ranged him tonight. If We saw him this morning. He went into that bedding area, herded that same doe back into that bedding area, followed her out here again, and he tried to get around us, and we got him. I have killed my 3 biggest bucks this last 7 days of October. I don't care what anybody says, I'd rather hunt this week than the rut anytime. You might see more big bucks, but if you're on a particular big buck, this is the best week to be on because they're doing the same thing still every day. That's what it's all about right here, folks. A giant 8-point Ohio whitetail. What an animal. I can't even put into words how I feel right now. I really can't. I mean, to see an animal like this and to have to make that far of a shot, I mean, I just had to depend on my equipment and my practice, and it paid off. Paid off with the biggest 8-point I've ever taken in my life.
Adam's arrow, tipped with a Triton broadhead, flew true to its mark, connecting with the 160-inch Buckeye State Bruiser. Welcome back to Lone Wolf's Whitetail Addictions. 3 weeks later, Adam flew into the Edmonton Bow Zone, located along the Saskatchewan River in Alberta, Canada. The Bow Zone is 1,600 square miles of the best whitetail country you'll find anywhere, and it produces world-class whitetails consistently. And the second morning of Adam's hunt is one that I'm sure he won't soon forget. As the giant non-typical moves into bow range and begins browsing at a distance of only 30 yards, Adam prepares for a shot at the enormous whitetail. Before the massive whitetail gives Adam a clear shot, he does the unexpected and beds down right in front of Adam's stand.
There is a giant bedded right in front of me.
With the buck and the doe bedded within bow range, all Adam can do is wait patiently and hope he'll eventually get a shot at this buck of a lifetime. After laying a mere 30 yards from Adam's stand for over 2 hours, the monster whitetail finally gets up and starts heading right for Adam's shooting lane.
Hey!
Adam knows instantly that although his shot was a complete pass-through, the arrow entered above the deer's lungs and below the spine, and it was most likely not a fatal hit.
That is probably the largest whitetail that I will ever see in my life. That deer had to have been 220, 230 inches. Just an enormous 6x6 with matching drops, split brow tines, a couple extra kickers. The kind of deer that you hunt for your whole life. Never expect to see one that big, let alone get a 20-yard broadside shot at him after watching him for 2 hours at less than 50 yards. Was bedded with a doe this morning when I got light out. He chased a little buck off a couple times. Came back in and bedded down even closer, 30 yards. I couldn't get a shot at him. He got up to stretch and walked 20 yards broadside, and I hit him high. That right there was a deer of 10 lifetimes. Never expect to see a deer like that. It's a kind of deer you only dream about.
Adam spent the remainder of the week looking for the huge non-typical with the help of a local pilot. One can only guess that this could have possibly been the largest whitetail ever harvested on video. But unfortunately for Adam, the Canadian giant was never recovered. Here's this week's whitetail hunting tactic with Andre DeQuisto.
A lot of hunters don't care to hunt to win. When you get these spots that swirl, a lot of guys say, I can't hunt that. There are hills and the wind's always switching constant directions. But how I've cracked that nut is I sit within 2 yards of the main trail that I think the deer are coming down, and I get neck-breaking height, and whatever way that wind switches or swirls to, it's constantly changing. The scent carries off enough that trail and drops that it's 20 yards either direction before anything can win me. And my safe zone is right where all those deer are moving through. You can get on the downwind side, thermal switch, wind switches. There's always going to be a time that wind's going to be wrong for you. You have set up more right on those trails, and the wind's never really wrong as long as that deer is coming right on that trail. Sometimes I like to get up right on them, get super high, and that cracks that nut.